Salutations, everyone! Welcome back to another Total Warhammer 3 guide. I'm Lord Forwind, and today we are going to be covering the Warriors of Chaos. Now, this is not going to be one video. This is going to be split between at least 2, if not 3 videos. This first one, we're going to cover basic mechanic concepts and everything else, but we're only going to be covering the undivided lords. So Archaon, Kholek Suneater, Sigvald the Magnificent, and Be'lakor. The other ones that came out in this whole Warriors of Champions of Chaos DLC expansion stuff recently are going to be their own separate video. Otherwise, we'd be here for 4+ hours. And of course, if you like the video, please do like, subscribe, ring the bell, make a comment, all that good stuff. So let's jump into it. This video is going to be divided into several sections, which I should put in chapters below so you can skip to what you're looking for. We'll cover the various faction concepts, there are a lot, and how they play, followed on by their various units, which is huge. They have a massive amount of units. The economy, which is pretty simple. Their technology, which is very basic for the Undivideds. And then finally, the various lords, their start locations, and any strategies associated with them. Okay, so let's get into it. Concepts. The Warriors of Chaos might be the faction with the most various mechanics and everything else, and there are a lot. So forgive me if for some reason I miss some subtle usage of them. So let's start with the very top. First off, they have access to this souls mechanic, which you get from winning battles, raising settlements, etc., etc. Of course, you don't get any souls if you're fighting other Chaos factions, but you can use them on Gifts of Chaos, which we'll explain, as well as ascending lords and heroes to passive glory. This is a pretty important mechanic for them. It basically gives you a second currency that you really only get through fighting. You want to keep an eye on your souls because you can run out of them pretty quickly, and that causes trouble for you. So the next mechanic is this Eye of the Gods. So this is a very odd mechanic. It's almost like a turn timer type thing. You've got these Gifts of Chaos that when you apply them slowly tick this Eye of the Gods up. Once it's complete, you'll get a dilemma. So you'll get a choice between 2, 3, 4 options. Some are really good. Some can be like permanent bonuses. Some can be minor bonuses. All in all, completing the Eye of the Gods is a very good thing. It will simply open, then it'll close, and then it'll restart. So don't worry about using it up. Once it's used up, it just starts again. All the rewards are worth it. Some are stronger than others, of course. I'm not going to get into that. You should be able to figure it out yourself. So, what are these Gifts of Chaos? Well, to do that, first we have to take a settlement, which we're doing this is Archaon. I'm probably saying this wrong. The Everchosen. We'll just call him Everchosen. So we need to take the settlement. So this is a little bit of his strategy. We'll merge this. But this allows us to talk about another mechanic. How the Chaos factions recruit units. They recruit them 2, 3, 4 different ways. The basic one here is your warband recruitment. Now, the cool thing about this is you recruit them instantly. This is very similar to how the vampire counts raise the dead, basically. On the other hand, you have a limited pool. You have a capacity that will slowly build up. It tells you the chance that they will replenish. And then you can recruit them. These are only going to be ever your really basic units for quite a while. Sometimes you'll get better ones, but usually they're basic. So anyway, we'll just quick auto-resolve our way through this. You'll see once we win a battle here, we have standard kill. We have, in this case, enslave, because they're a demonic faction. We also have sacrifice. So. We don't care about any of this, so we'll just auto-resolve our way into the fortress. So now that we've taken the fortress, you'll see we have a different option than usual. We can sack and raise, pretty normal, but we can also occupy and vassalize. This means, first off, we get a replenishment and we get 500 souls, but we take the settlement and there is a Norska tribe that's located in the rest of this region that will immediately become our vassal. This means at any point if you take a fortress, a chaos fortress, because this is a specifically marked one, you'll get a Norska tribe, assuming the tribe is still alive. There are cases where there are fortresses without tribes. I'm thinking the couple deep in the empire that are outside of the Norska regions where you won't get a tribe. So now that we've taken that settlement, we now have a vassal right here. These guys are pretty loyal. You can trade with them. It's usually worth getting a trade agreement and money. They'll fight for you. They are really loyal, and they're actually half decently effective. You can give them land. So if we go over here and take this monolith, it shows this little mark here. This is part of the Norska homeland for this faction. Can be gifted to them. You can feed your vassal lands, and that's important because as a Chaos faction, you really only want to own the Chaos fortresses. But before we go any further into that, let's talk about these gifts. So the gifts of Chaos divided amongst the 4 Chaos gods. Also, that eye is really fun to mess up. In the middle, you have the undivided. So you'll notice most of these are locked. You get them through technology research. Depending on the lord you have, you may start with more or less of them. In this case, this guy, the Ever-Chosen, starts with an actual extra gift. Most factions start with 1. So if you click on this, you will see that you can get a variety of effects, and it costs souls to start, and then it costs souls to maintain. If you can't afford it at any point, the upkeep, your gifts will be deactivated, and you'll have to spend money to reactivate them. Obviously, the further down you get, the more expensive they are, but in order to unlock these, you have to spend 15,000 souls on all these other various ones in order to unlock that. That applies for the other Chaos gods as well. You'll start with some basic ones, 2 of them, or 3 in this case, and then you will unlock further ones. Interestingly enough, some of these have bonuses that you can get by researching technology as well to improve them. Why is this important? Well, first off, it can give you stuff like replenishment, Marauders attack, and gain, which is important for the Chaos Warriors in terms of how they raise their units up. There's a lot of unit promotion in this faction, just as a foreshadowing it a bit. Also, this is where they can get stuff like this. These units will be instantly gifted to your pool and for every 3 turns after. So if we activate this, we have 3 turns till we get another unit from the gift, and there's 1 turn until we can change that gift. We can also just remove it. Now, if we click on this, you'll see we have this gifted units tab here. This is where any stuff you might get through various technologies or bonuses will appear. Obviously, there's a lot of them you can get access to. It's worth definitely checking as this guy because you get access to a Hell Cannon early on. And again, instant recruitment. You also have Regiments of Renown that you can unlock at some point. And then if you have Allied Outposts, you can recruit it. So you have 4 distinct ways to raise units as this faction, all of which recruit instantly, which is quite nice. Okay, let's talk about the Chaos Fortresses. This Writhing Fortress is marked with a Dark Fortress site. It provides a unique building chain for you. Doesn't apply to other non-dark factions. Chaos factions and stuff get this. These are going to be your main bases. In fact, your minor settlements are quite pathetic. They have a single building slot and a terrible garrison. I'm not going to go into the various buildings you build. Don't build the garrison building. You're pretty much going to want to build the one that gives you souls in nearby regions when you do battle, or casualty replenishment, right? Which are 2 choices of the 4 you get. So, suffice to say, non-Chaos Fortress, Dark Fortress settlements are terrible. On top of that, of course, they provide your access to your Norska factions. And if you click on this, you can then give targets to send your faction places, as well as click on this to construct outposts. It can be worth throwing down an outpost in your Chaos Vassals settlement at the beginning just to gain access to a few more Marauder units. Early on, you're going to be gated for the first 4 or 5 turns behind the fact that you can't always recruit units. But guess what? That's what the gifted units are for. Obviously, some of the gifted units here, Chaos Furies, are not necessarily the best units you can get. So let's talk about the Path to Glory mechanic. Now, it does not apply to your legendary lords, but your heroes and your non-legendary lords do have access to this other mechanic here, Paths of Glory. Now, this comes with two distinct different parts to it. You have these Boons of Chaos, which if you meet these requirements, they're instantly unlocked and they stay applied unless you do a Mark of Chaos Ascension here. They stay up. They can be pretty useful. Ward save. Some other ones will give you like regeneration. They're quite powerful. Honestly, I never went out of their way to complete these boons. I just happened to get them as I was playing. Obviously, if you find a really powerful one like this ward save, lose a battle and survive, that you can safely trigger, it's worth doing. But the odds of you losing a battle and surviving without an Immortal Lord are slim. However, the main focus here is these Marks of Chaos. Once you get to a high enough rank, rank 5, you can pay a set amount of souls to devote them to your hero to a specific chaos god. You can devote them to Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, etc. Now, what that does is it transforms them into an exalted hero of that faction. They start out as a generic exalted hero, which is not a bad unit. But if you really want to make them stronger, gain various bonuses, you can ascend them, devote them to one of the specific ones. Now, it doesn't show, unfortunately, it doesn't show all the options because there is a one where if they reach level 20 without being devoted, they can ascend to demonhood as a chaos undivided exalted hero. So what they are now. And they become a demonic unit. They can also become demonic if they are devoted to any of the chaos gods, but I figured you don't have to devote to a specific god to become a demon at the end. Once they become a demon, they get access to all the fairly standard demonic. Where do we have a demon here? Oh, we don't actually have a demon unit here. Basically, they don't rout. Instead, they lose health and die in place once their leadership gets low. That's the benefit of a demonic one. They also get stronger bonuses and stuff, obviously, as they level up. In my experience, if depending on what you're trying to build them towards your hero, you're going to want to pick different gods to ascend. If you want a pure combat one, go with Khorne. If you want a tanky one, Nurgle. If you want a flanking one, I don't really recommend a flanking hero. You could devote them to Slaanesh. It's not worth it, usually, in my opinion. And if you want a bit of a spellcaster, you can devote them to Tzeentch. In my experience, I usually devote them to Khorne, and I never regret it. They're already very powerful combatants. This makes them even stronger. Do note that they get half their previous rank. So if you send them at 5, they will be level 2. There are ways to counteract that with technology, but in the short run, you're going to lose the level, but they're going to get arguably stronger in the long run. Okay, another mechanic that you might notice is over here. These are the authority of your lord in the army. Now, you've got undivided and then the various chaos gods. As you increase the authority, you'll gain a variety of bonuses. It can go negative, and you will receive penalties. As you can see, with one Khorne authority, Khorne units replenish slightly faster, cheaper upkeep, cheaper recruitment, and cheaper warband upgrade cost. That bonus doubles when it comes to Nurgle, and it gets stronger as you go along. This is to incentivize you to focus your army in certain ways. If you're going to use a lot of Khorne units, you want a high Khorne authority in the army as possible. If you're going to be undivided, which means that basically like human units that aren't devoted to any specific chaos god, you're going to want undivided. Now, it's not a hard and fast rule. So long as they don't go negative, you can still freely have pretty much any unit in your army. But it is kind of nice to get something like a huge Khornite army and then have a really nice discount on it, 30%, or I think it's around 30. Yeah. 20% reduced upkeep, 30 recruitment cost, 10 casualty replenishment rate is really huge. Just be aware that focusing on that is a thing. Obviously, the Warriors of Chaos that are already devoted to specific lords, it's slightly different. This guy, of course, is undivided. Another thing that is worth noting is this guy here, the Ever-Chosen, as well as Be'lakor, the Shadow Prince, can confederate other Chaos factions if they take the other Warriors of Chaos's last settlement. They can then confederate them. Does not work currently with Kholek Suneater or Sigvald. I don't know if that's a glitch or what. It's also important to note, and I don't know if it's a glitch, that Be'lakor, the Shadow Prince, can in fact vassalize any faction in the game if he takes their last settlement. This includes legendary factions. I did it to all the Kislev ones in my Be'lakor run. It was a little weird because they were very disloyal, but they were technically my vassals. And the last major mechanic we have to explain, and I'll do it more later, is this Warbands upgrade. If you're only going to watch this part of the video, suffice to say, if you click on a unit and they get to a higher rank, you can then promote them upwards. You can also, once you research technology, devote them to the various chaos gods and ascend them up the ranks there as well. We'll talk more about that under the unit section. It's pretty straightforward, although it looks rather intimidating. So, now that I've explained all the concepts that I can find and remember offhand, let's go over how they play. So the Warriors of Chaos are undeniably the bad guys. They're the bad guys even worse than, say, the Dark Elves might be considered evil. These guys, Chaos is big bad. They're out to destroy the world. So what you're going to be doing is spending a lot of your time fighting against the forces of what they call Order, which is all the factions that are not devoted to the Chaos Gods. And I'm not sure if it includes vampires or Skaven. If somebody knows that, put it below. I don't think they're considered to be Order factions, but I could be wrong. So what's going to happen in most of your games, especially if you start in the Chaos Wastes, which all the undivided lords do, you're going to have one massive fortress that you're going to want to defend at all costs. So fortresses, build it up. Then what you're going to do is mass a large army and invade the lands of Order. If your army's destroyed, you'll raise another army at your fortress and keep charging in and over again. Hopefully, if you keep charging, they never come back and take your settlement. Losing an army as this faction is very painful, considering their army, as you upgrade them as they level up, gets stronger and stronger and stronger. But if you do lose one, you just simply rebuild. Your lands are pretty hard to invade, especially with your Norska vassals. They will handle most minor settlement invasions as well as back up your armies. So if you were to expand as this guy all the way down to where Kislev is, they've got a long way to march back if they kill your army, whereas you, with your settlement back here, are relatively safe. Most factions that are demonic factions, specifically Warriors of Chaos, you can get non-aggressions pacts with almost all the other Warriors of Chaos or demon factions around you, meaning your homeland is relatively safe, and it's really not worth your time taking out the other Chaos God factions. You're designed to go fight the good guys, and that's what you're supposed to do. The victory conditions for most of them are destroy factions, control some areas, and then raise settlements. That's pretty what it comes down to. Now, you might ask, well, I've got these great fortresses in the Chaos Wastes, but what happens when I move out of them? Well, as a matter of fact, there are some settlements that are Chaos fortresses outside of them. Obviously, Hawkland, or the area up here, is a Chaos fortress, but so does Midland. Further south, you get some other various odd Chaos fortresses scattered around the map. If you take them and occupy them outside of not getting a Norska tribe, because unfortunately there are none, you get all the benefits of one of these dark fortresses and you can build it up. So you're going to be a very small faction. I won the game as Archaon, only owning 3 settlements personally. My vassal owned like 6, but I sacked and raised 35. I took out most of the empire in the process. I will make a note that trying to kill the vampire factions with their corruption is actually one of the harder things for you to do. You're going to want to occupy a lot of settlements as this faction, even if the buildings you build in them are terrible, just to prevent the enemy from regaining them. You can always gift them to your vassals later. But the vampire settlements are particularly hard to take and maintain control of, because you don't get a chaos fortress near them, but also because of that corruption causes lots of trouble. It's just worth mentioning there. The other thing is, being an undivided lord here, we have no trouble having Slaanesh corruption in our lands, even though we promote chaos undivided. As corruption gets higher, there's more public order. The less you have problems. So basically, that's what you have to deal with. Okay, let's talk about the chaos units, the Warriors of Chaos units. This is easily the faction with the most possible units. Now, this looks amazingly intimidating, and it is. So we're not going to look at this. We're going to look at the warband upgrades. So there are roughly two, if not three, two units that you're going to ever have to really deal with. The first one here is your Marauder tree. This is your basic Marauder Norska warrior tree of upgrades. So the odds are you're probably going to start with Marauders or Marauders with great weapons. The other options you could start with are Marauder Horsemen or Chaos Trolls. Chaos Trolls is a very boring tree. You only go up one level. Now, what you can do with this Marauder unit is once it hits rank 5, you could, or in this case, rank 3, and you have the proper technology, you can then promote it to a higher level. Now, in my experience, and if you look at the stats, promoting it's always a good idea. All the way up here at the highest point, you get Aspiring Champions. Some people really don't like that unit, so if you stop here at the Chosen, you might in fact be better off. On the other hand, if you want to go with Chaos Spawns, you can do Forsaken straight into Chaos Spawns and get them. You also can change the path here, and instead of these are all counted as the same level, rather than stay as an infantry, you can promote them into Chaos Knights, mounted ones. Now, if you start with a Marauder Horseman, unfortunately, you can't move them back to an infantry, but you have another separate tree here where you can build Chaos Chariots. If you start with a Chaos Troll, you can promote it to an armored one. Sounds simple? Okay, it's about to get a lot more complicated. This is the undivided path. There is a separate path for each of the Chaos Gods. Now, you can, later on, you can just recruit Marauders of, say, Khorne immediately. Or if you click on a Marauder without it and you have the proper technology, you can, in fact, turn your normal Marauder unit into a Marauder of Khorne, or Tzeentch, or Nurgle, or Slaanesh. You can do it with any of them. So this is where, if you know the game and you've played as the Mono God factions, you will have a much better understanding of what type of units you're dealing with. And I'll cover them here for everyone who hasn't. Khorne units are highly offensive melee units. They have virtually no range. They are usually armor piercing and have some of the best combat stats in the game. Their biggest weakness is range. They usually have a level of spell resistance as well as potentially physical resistance. Basically, as Khorne, you're going to build a large melee army, charge into the enemy, and hope to win. That is how you're going to use Khorne units. Nurgle units, on the other hand, are tanky. If we were to, we actually don't have one, but if we were to click on a Nurgle unit, you would see that they have the Blessing of Nurgle, basically, which gives them increased melee defense and hit points. Nurgle units are tanks. They don't tend to do as much damage as the Khornite units, but they're usually a lot harder to kill without as many vulnerabilities as the Khorne units. But overall, Nurgle is probably the second best melee fighting faction. Some of their monstrous units tend to have stuff like regeneration on them, which makes them pretty powerful. Now, the next two are slightly different. You have Slaanesh. So Slaanesh's melee units are not nearly as good in straightforward combat as Khorne's or Nurgle's. Instead, Slaanesh's units tend to get flanking bonuses. In fact, they can get we don't have it here, but they can get an ability called Devastated Flanker, which basically doubles their charge bonus when they flank an enemy. And that is a very powerful thing to use. The reality is, if you have a choice, you're probably not going to want to build a melee infantry army as Slaanesh. On the other hand, Slaanesh has pretty good cav units. If we were to, we can't look right there, but you would see they have devastating flanker on them, and they are pretty strong for what they do. If you were to build an army to fight in melee, don't build a Slaanesh army without having some Nurgle or Khorne units to be your front line. You lose Slaanesh to flank. Now, the last one is Siege, or Siege. Some people say it different ways. They are the weakest in melee combat. On the other hand, outside of their infantry units, sometimes they have powerful spells. In this case, they don't have those spells. Instead, what they have overall is these barriers. This is basically a secondary hit point pool that needs to be destroyed before the unit starts taking damage. If you're outside of combat, the barrier will regenerate, which means you can charge in, do damage. Then if you either win or you pull your unit out, they will regen the barrier, basically healing them for a portion of their health. Now, in my experience, Siege units are not particularly good in melee combat. On the other hand, both Slaanesh and Siege have pretty good cav units. So Khorne has really powerful cav units, but in my experience, since you're going to be using cav to do flanks and charges, Slaanesh for the bonus charge bonus can be very strong. If they have the mark of the flanking bonus, double charge is huge. On the other hand, Siege's barrier is quite handy on its cav. In fact, they have probably one of the best chaos knights here, these Doom Knights. These, since cav tends to charge into the enemy route like archers or cav, having a barrier is really good on them because they can charge in, take the damage, but it goes on their barrier. They can rout or kill the enemy unit, and then they can heal up. They're fast enough to get away to let their barrier regen, and they're not going to be stuck in long, drawn-out melee where the barrier, once it goes away, their reduced hit points hurt them. So if you're going to build a ideal Warriors of Chaos army, now obviously it changes and it's kind of based off what units get experience and the like. You're going to want to have some pretty decent Khorne units or undivided units. The undivided units are respectable in their own right. Be aware of that. They tend to be the heaviest armored of the Chaos factions. You're going to want either Khorne, Nurgle, or undivided units to be the bulk of your army, the front line. Then you can have some Slaanesh units, ideally a Slaanesh cavalry unit with improved flank, as well as maybe one or two Siege units. If you're crazy enough to get the Doom Knights, this is a flying cav unit, which is really fun to use. Otherwise, you're just going to have to rely on the power of Siege and Slaanesh to do flanking abilities. You don't really have any access to range as this faction, just like most of the other Chaos factions. So there's going to be a lot of factions you're just going to have to charge at faster than they can kill you at range, making factions like the Wood Elves or the High Elves or even the Dark Elves a bit of a struggle with these factions. The other thing you can do with cav units, if you want, is you can go down the chariots. Obviously, there's different levels of chariots. Khorne has a particularly good one in their Gore Beasts. Basically play around with it. Certain factions have high level cav, like Khorne and Siege, whereas Nurgle and Slaanesh do not. And it just varies. In my experience, these Chaos Warriors of Khorne or Chosen of Khorne are probably some of your most powerful infantry units. I've never felt like I've done a bad thing when I've picked them, even over Nurgle. The Slaanesh ones, if you can get one with flanking, which is really only on their cav, is great. And Siege, I don't use that much on the Chaos Warriors, to be honest. I find that between Slaanesh and Khorne, you've got everything you need for a good army. Be aware that you can also get the various different spawns of them. The one thing to note is I particularly tend to like the Nurgle ones or the Zeech ones just because either the barrier or the increased tankiness helps an unbreakable unit even more than a combat stat does. And that's just my experience. I'm sure other people know how to use this faction better than I, and they will learn it. Even though I've already done 8, 9 runs, I still don't know all the ins and outs of the tree. But be aware that it does rely on you leveling up units. So if you're constantly losing units, your army is going to be very weak. You rely on a strong core of highly leveled up units to do well. This is actually one of the few factions we're getting dominating presence, the red line on your lords, as well as the training on your heroes is really good since these require experience to be leveled up. Getting them at an experience level to recruit is very difficult. So let's talk about the economy of the Chaos Warriors, the Warriors of Chaos. It's nice and simple. They have really one economic building right here, raid trophies. All told, it will get you 1,000 a turn. It's very powerful. It will help upkeep your armies. But your big thing is, as if you look at this treasure house further, is the boost to post-battle loot and sacking settlements. That's really how you're going to get your money to build buildings. Your passive income is really for your upkeep. Now, you do have technically another income building here. This Vassal's Emissary. It's both your control building. It also boosts income from all buildings in your adjacent regions as well as your vassal regions. So if you build this, you can improve your Norska vassals, give them more money to field more armies. Also spreads chaos undivided, which is nice. You also have a growth building casualty replenishment. I recommend your first builds in most of your warrior fortresses, chaos dark fortresses, are these two. Growth and money. What more do you need? Now, you have access to the anti-Skaven building. In my experience, you don't need this. If you're having trouble with Skaven Undercities, say in multiplayer, you might need it, but otherwise, not really an issue. The odds of you fighting somebody who blasts you with plagues as the Warriors of Chaos is pretty low, since only other Chaos God factions, the Nurgle ones, are going to have access to plagues anyway. The next one is a garrison building. I recommend you put this in each one of your dark fortresses. Losing a dark fortress is absolutely devastating to you. It already has a very good garrison. If you look at their garrison, it's quite strong. But having an additional garrison bonus, along with the defensive supplies and the projectiles, etc., is a big deal. All told, this will handle most single armies, if not 2 armies. I've actually won a battle with 2.5 armies just with the garrison. It's very powerful. You're going to want to build it in each settlement so that you don't lose your income. Now, I usually don't talk about buildings under economy, but it is worth mentioning this here. So the various buildings you get unlock warband capacity. And yes, you can get access to some decent units here from buildings, but unlike the other factions, your main source of units is not going to be buildings. It will be for your monsters, your manticores, chaos giants, and dragon ogres. These are kind of like undivided units. They don't have a upgrade path where you start with a base unit and upgrade it further, like the marauders do. So you can just recruit these here, which is quite nice. Over here, you got your various sorcerers: fire, shadow, I believe death, and metal. I particularly like metal myself. It's very good against unarmored enemies. Now, over here, you also get chaos spawn and trolls, which is nice if you wanted to recruit them. But the big benefit it provides is a cheaper recruitment cost on most of your base buildings. This one allows you to get exalted heroes, which is strong, as well as reduces the warband upgrade costs. So if for some reason you lose your big army and you're forced to recruit a weak army of marauders and the enemy invades you and you win that battle and then your units gain tons of experience, this building allows you to upgrade them cheaper. In reality, I never struggled with the upgrade costs. They're low. If they get patched to be higher, this might be more of a necessity. The next one over here, just corruption. Now, this advanced military are important. Each one of these increases the favor, which is your income, your money, from all buildings in the region. So this one right here, this Chaos Shrine, all the way up to Profane Sanctum, provides 50% extra income. So if you've got this here, this is no longer 1,000 building, but now 1,500. Basically, you're going to want to build all of the advanced income buildings. The other one that's important here is the stable building. Doesn't look like much at level 1, just 10% favor. Why would you build it? The key is once you're upgrading it all the way, recruit rank +2 for all units recruited in that province. Most upgrades at minimum require level 3, if not 5. Getting 2 starting ranks is really powerful, especially combined with Lord's other traits and bonuses to recruitment levels. Your goal is to get a good income from your dark fortresses, as well as multiply it by these advanced buildings, as well as get access to higher ranked units. Essentially, you're going to have a much more interesting economy and changes from tech than just pure economy, but it's worth mentioning here. Outside of your dark fortresses, though, your income's going to be coming from raiding and fighting. The Chaos Warriors have your pretty basic stances. They have a raiding stance. Be aware that if you raid, your units do have a weakened vigor. And in a faction that you're going to be fighting multiple enemies, sometimes multiple 3-4 armies around the same time every other couple turns, that can be very dangerous. I advise you move a lot with ambush stance so you don't get ganged up on by 5 armies, or use encampment stance to replenish once you've destroyed a building or something. As I mentioned earlier, and I will reiterate here, your minor settlements suck. Ideally, you want to give them to your Norska vassals if you can, or any other various vassals you might accumulate. If you do build them, you want the one that either gives you souls from battles or replenishment rate. I've never felt the need to get Winds of Magic increase, which is the other, and the garrison building sucks. Your economy, despite having favor, is not usually the problem. Your bigger problem will be getting enough souls to maintain your gifts of chaos. And that is the economy for the Chaos Warriors. On to technology. So I want to start this technology section by mentioning this tech tree changes if you're playing as one of the 4 Warriors of Chaos that's devoted to a various chaos god. They have a different tree. This is the undevoted tree, basically. So what you're going to have is a pretty basic start. This boosts your Marauders experience gain, which is good, because most of your army starts as Marauders and gets upgraded from there. Now, you'll notice that there are 4 major branches and 2 minor ones here. Or, sorry, 4 minor ones. So these are if you want to devote to a specific chaos god. If you're going to be using Khorne units, focus on them. If you're going to be doing Slaanesh, focus on them. Be aware that as you start researching more down their trees, you will start causing trouble to your authority. Dark Meditation here, for Zeech, gives you an authority as well as a gift, but be aware it lowers your Nurgle authority by 1. Now, your authority can be increased by various devoting of heroes as well as faction traits, but be aware that if one of those goes negative, the penalties, they don't kill you, but why have a penalty if you don't have to? This is probably one of the few tech trees where researching everything is not necessarily the best idea, unless you really want to. Pick 1 or 2 gods and focus on them. So let's talk about these various different things here. There are some highlights, and these are these techs at the 4 corners. This allows you to devote undivided units to Khorne and the other chaos gods. Each one has their own different one in their own corner. So if we have an army here with a Marauder and we want a Marauder of Khorne, we need this tech. So depending on which god you're going to devote your army to, I pick 1 to 2 gods at most. That's a tech you're going to want to get pretty early on. It is a huge buff, sometimes turning them into marauders of a specific god. Other things that are worth mentioning here. These all are relatively customizable by what you want to do. Early on, I recommend snagging Dark Diplomacy, depending on who you start as. Being able to get better relations with Skaven, Norska, and Beastmen every time you have a gift of Chaos Undivided, just pretty much it removes them from the game as an enemy, making only the Order factions your real problem. It's a nice thing to snag early on. It'll allow you to get non-aggression packs, etc. Depending on who you play, sometimes the Skaven are your best ally. This one, Infernal March, additional movement range is nice, but don't rush for it. Getting Culling of the Weak is a nice one here for the souls, but be aware it upgrades a gift that adds expendable to your Marauder units. This can be really handy if you've got a core of strong units, but then you're constantly building and losing cheap Marauder units. It'll make your army cheaper. Expendable is helpful because when they rout, they no longer ruin the leadership of your good units. I would avoid Slaves to Darkness unless you're going to really micromanage your vassals. And in my experience, the vassals are not really the best, but sometimes you can request armies as well as coordinate better with them. If you're going to want to use Chariots or Slaanesh Hellstriders, you're going to have to do Charioteer. If you want to use Forsaken, Thousand Twisted Blessings. Rite of Ascension, though, allows you to upgrade your Chosen Warriors. These are the more advanced units up here, Chosen. See, these are Chaos Warriors. You can upgrade to them without attack. But to upgrade to these Chosen level, you need that tech. I recommend trying to get it. You don't need it early on because none of your units will hit level 7, particularly early. But once you do, it's worth it. It also increases the XP gain for your Chaos Warriors, allowing you to get them to Chosen faster. Further down here, you've got Ruinous Monuments. Basically, it improves your altar buildings. These are your minor settlement buildings. Still doesn't make them anything better than trash, but it allows you to get heroes from them, which if you need heroes is great, but you can also recruit them at your dark fortresses. Demonic Pact up here is worth getting when you get the chance. It unlocks another undivided gift, as well as causing fear for some of your undivided units, so most of your marauders, as well as +1 authority in all armies. Helps replenishment, upkeep, recruitment. I could go on about this, but you kind of already get the idea. Further down here, this will get you your Chaos Knights, as well as make them magical attacks. This is worth snagging if you're going to fight heavy army factions, like dwarves, other warriors of chaos, etc. Heavy armored factions. Further down here, Gaze of the Dark Gods. Again, another gift, more authority, as well as perfect vigor for your undivided chosen units. Remember, that's your tier 3 infantry units. Outside of that, if you're going to be using beasts, Unchained Beast can be quite nice early on. The reality is, though, the odds of you using Chaos Warhounds for long is not a good idea. They're not great units and should be replaced by Cav almost immediately, but it is a nice little bonus on your Manticores on the other hand. Further down here, this is boost to your Trolls and Giants. If you're using them, this is huge. The 25 missile resistance, once they level up, makes them significantly better against their main weakness, which is arrows. Further on here, your Dragon Ogres and Dragon Ogre Shagaros, which are amazingly powerful units. I didn't talk about them under the unit section because they're not part of the upgrade trees. They're really good. They're really strong. They're some of the strongest units in the game. Over here, more upgrades to your Cav, as well as your Chaos Knights getting XP gain. If you're using Cav, Slaanesh, or Zeech ones, this is a particularly good thing to snag. This one upgrades your Hell Cannon units, which if you're the Ever-Chosen, you can get one almost immediately. And then War Machines, if you're using Chaos War Shrines, they will get a ward save. So I'm actually going to wander back to the units here briefly to just point out these Chaos War Shrines, each one of them has a different type of bonus. So you're going to want to pick whichever one suits your best play style. So if you're going to be melee, Corn is good. I particularly like the Nurgle one because it's healing of your units, which can be very powerful. The Slanesh one here does damage in an area, so if you're fighting an enemy you can't kill, although you're mostly armor piercing, heavy armored, there's really no one you can't kill. That can be good. I don't particularly like the Zeech one. Helps with if you're spell casting, but honestly the Warriors of Chaos tend to be melee. Over here, I'll just point these out. This is your Chaos Giant, very strong single entity unit. The upgrade to it, making it more missile defense, is huge. And these are your Dragon Ogres. These are top of the line units. They hit hard, huge mass, very powerful. And that's pretty much their units as well as their technology. So on to the various starting lords and locations. Okay, so we'll start with the one we're at right now, Archaon or Archaon the Ever-Chosen. I don't know how to pronounce it properly, so don't blame me. This is pretty much your generic Warriors of Chaos leader. Now, he's arguably one of the best lords in the game, as well as his factions. Probably either the strongest or second strongest of the Warriors of Chaos, so don't feel bad playing this guy. So, you're the Ever-Chosen, so you're basically focus of all 4 Chaos Gods' blessings and everything else. You get an additional gift. Your research rate goes up 10% per vassalized faction, meaning you can get through the tech tree faster than any other of the Warriors of Chaos. That's a huge bonus. You get a diplomatic relation improvement with other Chaos factions, as well as souls per turn from vassalized factions. Basically, you want to subdue a lot of Norska factions to get the full bonus, but also this guy can subdue other factions, just like Be'lakor. So sometimes you can get non-chaos factions. Now, be aware, might be a glitch, might be patched. If it is, sorry about mentioning it, but if it isn't, it's a pretty powerful strategy. Lots of factions. You're probably the only chaos Warriors of Chaos faction that actually doesn't really have to worry so much about soul upkeep. The vassal faction, it doesn't solve it completely, but if you have 2 vassals, it'll cover the cost of one of the low-level Gifts of Chaos. It's just a really nice little bonus. Now, the Ever-Chosen himself is a very powerful lord. He starts off with really good combat stats, 70 melee attack, 60 melee defense. He's definitely one of the top combat lords in the game. He's also armor piercing. He has everything you need to be a great fighter. He can almost be a one-man army. He's also a spellcaster on top of that. But let's look at his stats. First off, every rank that your weapon and missile units get, they get 3% more missile strength. This is really good considering you need to level up your units to upgrade them. By the time they get to level 5, your basic Marauder unit is doing 15% more damage. When they're upgraded, that 15% stays, making them even stronger. +1 authority. Okay, his units are cheaper and better to maintain because all the Chaos Gods like him. The big thing here is the ward save +5. So this is basically a 5% damage reduction on your entire army. Ward save is amazingly strong. The fact that even your basic infantry units get it is kind of nuts. Makes him have arguably the strongest army of the Warriors of Chaos. So outside of that, he's got a pretty standard blue line here. There's nothing amazing about it. I have a feeling it's going to get a bit of a rework. The big one to note here is Devoted of Chaos. Increased souls from battles, which is nice. But more importantly, experience gain for units while fighting against the forces of order. If you're complaining about how long it takes you to level up your units so you can upgrade them, this is a great one to get. I get it really early on and tend to leave it there, fully upgraded for the rest of the game. Unholy Resilience on this guy is great. Makes him heal more so he can fight more. Now, you want to get this Fetid Gallipot or Gallipot for the replenishment rate. The attrition reduction, I've never really had too much trouble with attrition with the Warriors of Chaos. But if you are dealing with it, the vampire one can be a pain. This helps. Afterwards, normally you have a upkeep reduction. You don't get that for the Warriors of Chaos. Instead, you get more money from battles. 15% isn't huge, but it is quite nice. If you're fighting Skaven or you're getting ambushed all the time, this is worth getting. But outside of that, this is a faction getting Lightning Strike on level 3, so you get Lightning Strike battles, is very useful. Sometimes you can get surrounded in your fortress, or the enemy might send 3 or 4 armies nearby you. This will allow you to target one army at a time. You can fight some amazing battles. I won 5 battles in one turn with this faction using this, which if I had fought them all together, I would have easily lost. And Chaos Unchained is just worth it. Souls, income, uncorrupted movement. Get it when you can is pretty powerful. Now, the red line here is rather interesting, and it deserves a special mention. First off, it's a pretty generic red line, boosts to individual units. The big thing here is these Chaos Vanguard and Savage Bloodlust. Chaos Vanguard applies to your non-demonic infantry units, as in your low-level, like your basic Marauder type units. Savage Bloodlust applies to your demonic melee units. So these are units you might get gifted through the Gifts of Chaos. You might get Marauder Bloodletters of Khorne, for example. This buffs them, but the other bonus here of Chaos Vanguard doesn't apply to them. So depending on what you're going to use, demonic units or undivided units, pick one and upgrade it first. The buff here of 10 armor and 8 attack means your base Marauder unit becomes almost a tier 2 infantry unit rather than tier 1. It's very powerful early on, and I recommend it after you get the experience gain in the blue line so that your Marauders survive longer so you can upgrade them more. Now, this guy has a rather confusing tree of stuff. He starts off with basic metal, but then he gets some death, he gets fire. Overall, he gets some pretty powerful spells. Purple Son of Xerxes will ruin anyone's day if dropped on a melee line. Honestly, though, outside of maybe throwing a point or two into Searing Doom early on, just so I have a spell, or even one into Doom, one into Burning Head, I don't tend to turn him into much of a spellcaster. It's worth giving him 1 to 2 spells early on. He starts with Searing Doom and Spirit Leech, so upgrading them is not needed. But early on, a powerful spell can help him win more battles than you'd expect. He's got a pretty standard yellow line we'll come back to, but let's look at some of his unique stuff. So up top, he gets a Steed of the Apocalypse when he's rank 10. This is arguably one of the better steeds in the game. It doesn't weaken his combat stats, but gives him more HP, speed, and charge bonus. Other than that, he can't fly with it, which is unfortunate. Rule of Chaos, he starts already leveled up. This just gives him more undivided authority. Once you hit level 21, it's worth snagging a point into, but you really don't have to. Lord of the End Times, more aura, helps your dominating presence, but honestly, your units don't tend to rout that much anyway. Chosen of the Gods, once you get it at rank 18, it's great. Melee defense, attack, weapon strength, all good. Hearts of Iron can be worth getting early on. Vigor reduction is one of those things that's kind of behind the scene for most people. But basically, as your units fight, they get weaker as they get tired. They can't move as fast, etc. Having this just extends their combat ability that much longer. Aura of Chaos, once you get him to the point where he's a monster on his own, 10% missile resistance is good, but don't rush it. Now, this is where he gets to be interesting. He's the Grand Marshal of Chaos, so any lords you recruit are higher rank, but more importantly, unit experience gain goes up by 15%, and yes, it stacks with Devoted of Chaos for around 35%. Your units are going to level up really quickly. He gets this upkeep for Chaos Warriors and Warband upgrade costs for Undivided cheaper. This guy is not really incentivized to devote your units to any particular god. He's almost better off just leaving them as Marauders and then upgrading them straight from there. If you do, they're nice and cheap, and it's cheap to upgrade them. Chosen ones, any Chaos Chosen units you get, which is a bit your level 3 infantry, they get physical resistance as well as melee defense, making them really good in melee combat. Knights of the Herald, this boosts your Chaos Knight units as well. Weapon strength speed, always nice. This one's kind of cool. +1 hero capacity for exalted heroes, but more importantly, hero recruitment rank +4. They need to be rank 5 to be devoted to a Chaos God. They're already getting 4 more levels towards that. Basically, you pick them and you can almost devote them immediately. Be aware, of course, the devotion takes souls, so don't use it too much. And then finally, Ascension to Demonic Demonhood gets +1 authority and he becomes demonic. He gets physical resistance, does not rout, immune to terror, and takes damage when leadership is low. I've seen this debated already if this is a good one to take. The authority is great, but the demonic part is, from what I've seen, it's semi-debatable. Yes, it does give 20 physical resistance, which is nice. On the other hand, this guy already has great leadership and good combat stats, so he doesn't tend to die that easily, even if he's about to rout. Whereas taking this, he can actually start taking damage sooner than if he was not demonic. Basically, once he gets low health, he's going to die really fast with the demonic trait. Whereas this one, as long as he's got good leadership, he might not die as easily. It's kind of up to you. Try it both ways. Figure out which one you like. I turned him demonic just because I like completing the tree. Outside of that, his standard yellow line here, he's already a powerful combatant, meaning he doesn't really need armor upgrades. He doesn't even really need melee attack upgrades. Melee defense, charge bonuses, these are stuff that strengthens areas where he's already good, and you'll actually see a noticeable impact. Hard to hit, fully upgraded is great. If you want to constantly be fighting a melee, this Deadly Blade is good, but honestly, Devastating Charge +30 stacked with his mount means he's going to be getting like 120 charge bonus. It's really great. Post Speaker, obviously you have to take it. Now up here, Blade Shield, buffing it again. You can get +24. He'll have 84 melee defense, which is great, making him really hard to hit. You do not need to take Indomitable here if you don't want to. On the other hand, having the high leadership here means that the Demonhood, he'll be harder to start taking damage, and elsewise he won't rout as easily. Considering he can be a one-man army, it's not a bad thing to snag, but honestly, I like the weapon strength and hit points more. Blade Shield is definitely the strongest one there, though. Deadly Onslaught, it's great if you're fighting other lords, otherwise ignore it. His quests are some of the best quests in the game, so we'll go over them. They're all quest battles. They're all really good. They boost his melee attack, magical attack, Slayer of Kings, huge augments, more undivided authority, as well as chaos corruption. This armor of Morcar, melee defense, temporarily in an area, great to buff your army if the enemy is charging into you. Gives him more armor, ward save again, +10 is huge, more undivided. If you haven't figured it out, he's the undivided Lord of the Warriors of Chaos, heavily. This eye here, Zeech authority. Basically, this allows him to cast more spells, as well as giving him a very nice little barrier. Crown of Domination is really nice. It is a constant effect. Basically, it gives him leadership, causes him to cause terror for your allies around them, more leadership, and now they're immune to psychology, meaning you can't reduce their leadership stuff through fear or terror. It's a nice buff, as well as the melee attack and defense. It's worth getting all 4 of these. You don't necessarily have to rush them. I completed a run with him without getting any of them, mainly because I was trying to win the run as fast as possible. But out of them, they're all really good. This word save makes him so much tankier. It's ridiculous. In terms of his starting location, you've already seen the initial battle. Add the hero to the army, recruit the units, take the fortress. You can do it all with auto-resolve. Once you do, make sure you get that Hell Cannon, because this is an amazing artillery unit. It's really your only artillery unit, and it's really strong. Once you take Withering Fortress, you'll have a vassal. Make a trade agreement with them. Make some money. If you want, you can try and get non-aggression pacts with your neighbors. It's not overwhelmingly hard. The big prize of your neighbors is located to the south, down here, where Kholek Suneater and other Warriors of Chaos is. You don't want to expand in his direction. He'll expand towards you. Once you meet him, though, try and get a non-aggression pact. Otherwise, he actually tends to declare war on your vassal. And then you either have to kill him or wait till he's willing to make peace. It's a bit of a pain. Once you've taken this settlement, obviously, you're going to need to wait till you heal up as well as gain some more units. Thankfully, you'll get them higher. To get various units based off the climate as well. Recruit a full army. Don't really care what type of units you get in the army. You just want as full of an army as you can. March down here. Finish off the remains of this Slaanesh faction. Honestly, I wouldn't take it for yourself unless you want to see how bad the minor settlement buildings are. You can. And you can always give it to your vassal later. But I tend to give it to the Khol, your subjects here. Afterwards, you've got two options. One, you can go west, and you can, if you want to, fight your way through the Bloody Sword, as well as further over here, you'll find Boris Ursus. It's worth killing off Boris Ursus as soon as you can, I'm going to be honest. He's really the only threat outside of a weird Kholek Sun Eater invasion. It's worth, after you take this, marching over here and take out Boris. He tends to only own one settlement by the time you get there. You're not going to be able to win in a direct battle, but if you set up an ambush and declare war, he's dumb enough to march out, and you'll win that battle, and then you take a settlement, and voila, the threat is solved. You can finish this guy off. If you do, you can get access to the Tong faction from their Dark Fortress. It's going to take a little while for you to beat them, but beating them would subdue you a large portion of the waste, as well as give you 2 different Norska vassals, so additional research rate, as well as relations, as well as good money. Afterwards, you may get a non-aggression pact from Skaven living down here near Pillar of Skulls. You do not want to take that non-aggression pact. The biggest reason you don't want to take it is Kholek Sun Eater will eventually want to take that land from the Skaven, and if the Skaven own it, you want to be allied with Kholek Sun Eater first off. They will ask you for an alliance and stuff. You'll either have to help one or the other. The reality is, it's good enough lands. You really want to get to Karak Doom down here, which is another Chaos Fortress. This one, as soon as you take it, immediately becomes your recruitment center, not your writhing fortress up there. That becomes your fallback point. Once you've taken this area and ideally killed off the Skaven, you have a couple other options. You're going to get contact with the other Norska factions. They tend to really like you, so you can ally them. Or if you want them as subjects, you can declare war. Be aware Throg can be a little bit of a pain, but he's a great vassal if you can subdue him. There's not a ton of Chaos Fortresses in easy range, though. The next easiest one for you is going to be Prague, which is in Kislev. Your victory goal as this guy is, the short one at least, is to wipe out the Tsarina, as well as control these 2 regions, which both you'll control pretty easily. So don't worry about those. You can pretty much march down here with the army you get. If you fight Boris as well as the Skaven, you should have a strong enough army that you can pretty much march in and take Prague, so long as they don't have a stack sitting there. Turn that into a fortress. Either lure out the Tsarina or just use the fact that from Prague to Kislev is 1 turn's march to snipe her capital when she's away. Without her capital, she falls really quickly. If you wipe her out, there's a chance you can subjugate her. If you do, cool. I honestly just killed her off. She's never going to like you, and because of the way vassals work, she'll have trouble with your corruption anyway. Further down here, you'll find obviously Wood Elves Vampire, or you can go west into the Empire more. Be aware here, Azael up here, another Warriors of Chaos, doesn't tend to like you in my experience. He tends to declare war on you. And further up north here, eventually Malice Darkblade, a Dark Elf faction, tends to become a problem. But honestly, once you've taken Kislev as well as Prague and set up at least three, if not 4 Chaos Fortresses, you'll be all right. There's really going to be no threat to your settlements for some time, so you can just take the Ever-Chosen, charge into the Empire, and get the needed stuff for a short victory with no trouble. I wouldn't go east. There's no really reason to. That's going to get you headed towards Cathay. There's already a Warriors Warriors of Chaos faction over here, as well as greenskins and ogres. You don't really need to. Your mission is simple. Go crush the Empire, really. Your best ally, if you can get him, is going to be Kholek Sun Eater, as well as Throg, who's the Skaven guy who lurks up here in the Hell Pit. He tends to like you. He's kind of nice to have because he can fill in all the minor settlements you might not be able to give to your vassal. You really just want to get the Chaos Fortresses. Everything else, you don't care about. I'm going to be honest, you really don't care about them. And that's it. On to the next Lord. So, next Lord of Chaos, Warriors of Chaos Lord, sorry, Kholek Sun Eater. So this guy, he is, you may have seen a video made by another YouTuber talking about how broken this guy is. Well, I disagree somewhat with that video. He can easily become the single most powerful fighting lord in the game from his base stats. So let's talk about him. First off, he's the Herald of the Tempest. He gets, again, he's undivided, so he gets bonuses towards undivided authority, as well as a gift of chaos, which is nice. Obviously, you have to take one, but you have two. Your Dark Fortresses allow you to the ability to recruit Dragon Ogre Warbands, which is quite nice because these are a very powerful unit. You can't do any upgrades with them, sadly, but they don't really need it. They're a monstrous unit already. Having two in your starting army is almost game breaking early on, as long as you don't lose them. The fact that you can recruit more of them is quite nice. And his big thing is he gets empowered by worship. For every currently vassalized faction, he gets weapon strength, mass, and armor. All told, he already has a extraordinarily high weapon strength, decent armor, and then his mass, he's one of the largest mass units in the game with 6,000. 5% of those is huge. All told, you can get his weapon strength at some stupid levels as you vassalize more factions. But I don't find it unbelievably game breaking because it's harder to build up his other stats to keep him alive. But he's still really strong. So let's look at him specifically. So he's the mountain god. For the Carnage Incarnate Gift of Chaos, it's cheaper. It has to do with his whole ogre background type stuff. Dragon ogres as well as dragon ogre Shagaroths are cheaper to build to maintain, which is great. And any monsters, infantry, and monster units have more missile resistance. If you haven't figured it out, this is the guy all about monsters of the Chaos Warriors of Chaos. So he's got a very similar blue line to the Everchosen. Get Devoted of Chaos, so you get more souls as well as experience. Probably want to get Serve or Die just to make it a little bit cheaper to recruit. Over here, Fetid Gallipot for the replenishment is great. Lightning Strike is also strong, as well as Chaos Unchained. Now, he's not a spellcaster like the Everchosen, so he's got a pretty standard red line. He does not have a spell line. Considering he's about monster strength, can be worth doing this monster strength skill, basically. The boost in melee attack to your Dragon Ogres is really nice. Further on down here, the bonuses of like freakish mutations, a word save on them is quite nice. It gives them a word save similar to what the Everchosen have, which is nice. It's not stronger. I honestly think it should be stronger. Up here, he's got a standard yellow line. Honestly, melee defense is more important than melee attack. Considering how strong he is at attacking already, the Wound Maker ability here to give him more weapon strength can be considerably powerful. Up top, he's got this moving mountain. This gives him a huge increase to his mass. It's already 6,000, 25% more is huge. He'll knock enemies away. He charges into them better. All told, it's great. His weapon strength gets stronger when he sieges settlements. It's great if you're smashing an enemy fortress, but he's already strong enough. Toughened skin, more armor, more spell resistance. Considering spell resistance is one of his few weaknesses early on, it's great. Giant Killer, if he's fighting anything else that's large, although to be honest, he's bigger than anything else, bonus first large is nice, but the big bonus here is the weapon strength. Seismic Shock, any enemies he hit get reduced melee defense as well as speed, as well as charge for his Dragon Ogres, which is a really nice ability. Their charge ability is nice. It's not amazing. So as nice as 15% is, I'd prefer almost a plus 15. This one, movement casualty replenishment rate, is great. It's worth getting, probably the first one in that category I would. And then the Sun Eater becomes demonic. The big bonus here is reducing enemy leadership, which is awesome, as well as the undivided authority. Up top, Rule of Chaos, get some undivided authority. You can level it up when you want to. It's worth using. A lot of your units are undivided. Since you don't have any benefits to going under any specific gods, you can kind of do whatever you want. He gets Lord of the Storm, which is a non spell, as in you don't use up spell power to use. It's great. You can do some significant damage. It's worth using in every battle when it's off cooldown. Storm Rage. This basically gives him Tempest Rage. He gives a huge buff to his damage, charge, and attack, as well as the ability to buff the various Dragon Ogres and Dragon Ogre Shaggoraths in his army. Hearts of Iron, again, a vigor reduction. Can be nice on your monstrous units since they tend to be fighting for a long time. Missile defense on him is actually really good. One of his few weaknesses is spells and range. He already has one to give him spell resistance. An additional missile resistance is quite nice. In terms of his quests, he only has one, but it is a strong one. Star Crusher. It's a massive warhammer. Total warhammer, anybody? Well, not exactly, but this should be it. Huge boost to melee attack. This is why, if you do it on his yellow line, it's almost pointless to build up his like deadly blade stuff. He gets going to get bonuses that get him high enough as is. Magic attacks, because doing mass amounts of damage that armor penetrating wasn't good enough, as well as more weapon strength and armor piercing damage. But the big bonus here is Star Crusher. It's a huge boost to armor piercing damage, as well as splash, meaning he can hit more enemies with his swing, has a nice little duration, and it's great to use. All told, he is extraordinarily powerful. He's going to wipe and kill a lot of units. My only complaint with this guy is you can build other lords in the game to be better duelists against other lords than this guy. He's still really strong, though. It's quite fun to see him on the battlefield. This does not give a good impression of his size. He's described as a moving mountain, so he should be like 3 or 4 times bigger than this guy easily. He's kind of cool. He's pretty much one of the least human and not really demonic units in the game. Okay, so you start over here as this guy near the challenge stone. This is going to be your dark fortress, so you want to take it out. You'll get access to these guys to the north. Dolgan, they will become your subject. Further north is the Everchosen. Can be worth going up there, sending a hero to make contact and get at least a non-aggression pact with the Everchosen. You're both on the same side, so why really fight them? He's going to go towards the Empire. Your job is to go south. Guess what's to your south? One of the other strongest lords in the game, Grimgor Ironhide, lurks right here. He's going to be your first challenge. I recommend trying to take him out as soon as you can. Your starting army, once you've built it up with some more of these warband units, is going to be better than what he has. If you let Grimgor go on long enough, he's going to become hard to kill, especially one-on-one in battles. Killing him early while you have the advantage is great. Once you're done with that, you're basically, your whole thing is to expand south. You've got all these various mountains and stuff. Your victory condition, oddly enough, is to smash your way into Cathay, but really there's no rush. Yes, you can go down here and get a start on them really early on, or if you want to, and it's the easier route, punch your way through the mountains, then spill into Cathay from the side. This avoids the Grand Bastion. On the other hand, you pretty much have to destroy the Grand Bastion anyway. So it's up to you. I liked going south because by the time I got here, my army was capable of easily taking the Grand Bastion, whereas otherwise you might run across some trouble. Be aware that there is another Warriors of Chaos faction, the Zeech one over here, that might already own these lands. It can be worth taking them out. If not, becoming friends with them is great, but you really want the dark fortresses that lurk in this area so that you can siege Cathay much easier. But if you don't want to do that, you can just keep going south and conquering things. Just be aware that Cathay early on is weak. As time goes on, they become much harder to kill. Especially that Grand Bastion. As it levels up, high level, really terrifying to fight. And honestly, that's it. Outside of Grimgor Ironhide, he's your biggest threat. Once you kill him, there's really no one else in the region that's a big problem for you. If you go down here, you might run across the King of the Ogres, who can become a little bit of a problem, but your army is superior, and your Dragon Ogres right here, despite being called ogres, don't follow him, and they're better than anything he can field early on. Honestly, have fun. Make sure you recruit more of these guys. The biggest danger is that you build an army of all of these, which, by the way, is really expensive. You're going to need some trash units to tie up the enemy while these kill everything that's strong. Just be aware of that. All told, he does really well with Khornite factions units, because those tend to supply lots of cheap units that then his stronger units can then kill around them while they tie up the enemy. But it's up to you. Nurgle is not bad either. It allows your strong units to kill things while the Nurgle units just don't die, basically. And anyway, that's Kholek Suneater. He should be a lot bigger than he is. All told, he can become strong. I wouldn't say he's the single strongest lord in the game, although he does make a good attempt at it. On to the next one. Okay, here we are as the last of the Total Warhammer 1 and 2 Warriors of Chaos. Prince Sigvald the Magnificent. So Sigvald is... he's kind of a weird thing. He's not very different than the new champion of Chaos, Azarel. But he is now finally somewhat distinct from the Everchosen and Kholek Suneater. He is devoted to Slaanesh. Even though in some ways he's almost an undivided one, the reality is he has access to a good portion of the Slaaneshi faction bonuses, which is quite cool. So let's look at them. First off, all the gifts of Slaanesh are cheaper than souls, which is great for your gifts, considering this guy is Slaanesh's so-called favorite son. His vassals are immune to psychology and spread Slaanesh corruption. This is great. I wish this was a thing for, say, the actual Slaanesh lord there, Nikari, because this prevents your vassals from collapsing due to your own corruption. Hopefully they change that. He has access to the seduction mechanic, where he can, in a battle, if you do this, you will see you can seduce units. We can click down here, pay a cost. This unit will, for the battle only, join our side. After the battle, if their army survives, it will rejoin them. The odds are they won't, in which case it will be destroyed. On the other hand, we've just taken away one of his better units. You can only at this point do 2, but it is quite nice. Be aware, though, it does cost money to use. So there we go. Sacrifice captives to get some money. Another thing is he can give the gifts of Slaanesh. So we just took out a lord. That lord now has a gift of Slaanesh on them. And this is, if you've played Nikari, you will already know this mechanic. They have this seductive influence, which, as you fight them, corrupt their lords, take their land, or they have to deal with corruption or cults, this can grow. Once this fills up to max, you can pay a cost. I'm actually not sure what the cost is for these guys. Let me double check this. Oh, wait. I can't. That's a little annoying. I can't do diplomacy with them. If you have 2,000 souls, it's a soul cost rather than a cultist cost for these guys. You can then force them to become your vassal, which is quite nice. It's rather kind of cool. I like doing it. The reality is right now vassals kind of suck, though. Although this guy has better vassals than the other because they spread Slaaneshi corruption for you. Outside of that, let's look at Sigvald himself. So Sigvald himself has similar stats to the Everchosen, slightly worse combat stats than Kholek Suneater, considering everybody does. He is a powerful fighter. He's got physical missile resistance. He has this supreme vanity where he gains XP faster, meaning you can level him up at a pretty nutty rate. He also spreads Slaanesh corruption, which is nice. And any marauders of Slaanesh, basically the Slaanesh infantry units, move faster, which is kind of handy. Of course, Slaaneshi melee units aren't necessarily the best combat ones for a long time. They're more about flanking and stuff. Anyway, speed is nice. Now, he's got your standard blue line that the other two old warriors of chaos, I don't really know how else to describe it, have. The big difference here, he gets Dark Seducer, which spreads Slaanesh corruption rather than undivided. Basically, he's all about that, not so much about the undivided authority. You know what? Let's just win this. I don't care about losing the units. The reality is you don't want to do that. So you'll see here, we spread both Uncorrupted as well as Slaanesh, and we've now gained a subject over here, and we can feed that subject various other provinces. Outside of that, he's got a pretty standard red line here. Be aware that he is a bit more into using Slaanesh units, so Savage Bloodlust, especially if you get Demonites of Slaanesh through the Gifts of Slaanesh system, this can be very powerful, especially the charge bonus as well as the armor. I find he's better at being a Slaanesh faction than, say, Nakari is, which is kind of hilarious. Outside of that, he's got a pretty standard yellow line. His combat stats are already pretty good. You can make him into pretty close to a one-man army. It can be worth doing. He's already got great armor and stuff, so the armor isn't the priority. It is the melee defense early on, as well as the hit points. Now, he's one of the few lords that has some interesting stuff. He's completely self-obsessed. He's an egomaniac. So his army gets more leadership, and he gets more money from his vassals. All told, I think this is the best guy to have vassals with, honestly. Like, his vassals perform better than most people's. He actually gets money from them. They spread. Over here, he becomes self-obsessed. He's already pretty decent of 55% range defense with the shields. Now becomes 70. He's not impossible to hit at range, but it's a lot harder than you'd expect, especially since he has some missile resistance. Now he gets stylish. I'm sure there's a hair flip in there somewhere. Melee defense in this whole army, harder to kill. Really good, especially on Slaanesh units, but also comes in handy on if you use Nurgles because they're tanky. The physical resistance is amazing. It's not as great as the word save the Everchosen gets, but it's a nice bonus. Driven, they get any Slaanesh units get more experience as well as income from fighting. It's just a nice bonus. The experience gain is rather cool. Born to Serve is kind of interesting. All non-character units, as in no heroes or lords, now are expendable, meaning you can lose your whole army and your lords and heroes will fight on to the death. The downside is if your expendable units rout, they'll rout your other expendable units. You can get a similar effect through technology. This is not one you particularly need to get, except that you need it to get Unworthy. It also boosts your hero's success. Unworthy gives him the demonic trait. It also gives him the Fiendish Musk, which weakens enemies that he's fighting. Lower melee and speed really helps, as well as the boost to Slaanesh authority. He already starts with 3. That would boost it up towards 5. So other than that, he is the Paradise of Pleasure ability, which basically means he has more Slaanesh authority, less Khorne. Basically, don't use Khorne as this guy. They don't get along. You can boost that even higher, all the way up to 4. You can also get Marked by Slaanesh, which gives you even more authority, as well as improving relations with the other Slaaneshi factions, usually who die quickly and is less than useful. However, he is the favored son, so any aspiring champions and chosen get the Soporific Musk attack, which basically weakens the enemy when you attack them. It's quite nice. He also gets Supple and Spry, gets even more missile defense. All told, this guy can become very tanky to physical as well as range, where he almost becomes immune to hurt at range. His weakness is magic. That's the reality. He's weak against magic. Now, he gets 2 rather useful quests. So he gets an ability here that boosts his weapon combat, which is quite nice. And it also gives him more Slaanesh authority. Basically, you can hit 10 Slaanesh authority on this guy without too much trouble, which is great because he's all about the Slaanesh. Post battle, spreads more corruption. This guy can literally just walk into an area and start spreading like 20% corruption a turn. It's really crazy. As well as just general combat boosts. The auric armor here is quite interesting. Auric armor heals himself per second unless he's routing. So he gets regeneration. He's already a monstrous fighter. Now they give him regeneration. I won't say he's the strongest individual lord, but he is certainly in the top 5 or 6 of them. The regeneration definitely puts him up there. The additional armor, as well as the healing cap, meaning he can heal for way more than you'd expect. And he's immune to contact effects, which makes him perfect for dueling lords and other people like Skaven who might apply poison to him. All told, I really like his 2 quests. They make him significantly stronger. The armor a little bit more than the Silver Slash, but that boost in weapon damage and strength is amazing. So he starts here, kind of halfway around the Warriors of the Chaos Waste, just north of Norska and Albion. It's kind of a boring start, to be honest. It just kind of is. You start at war with these Dark Elves to your west. Obviously, you do what I did. You add this guy in first. You're going to want to devote your lords, by and large, to Slaanesh, because why not? You've got 2 Lore of Slaanesh as well as Lore of Shadows. I like the Lore of Slaanesh better. Basically, Fortress of the Damned is probably one of the most safest buildings in the game. Outside of Malice Darkblade winning this area and coming after you, most everyone else is never going to get to the fortress. Norse guys shouldn't declare war on you. You're pretty safe here. Be aware, though, that your first province is, in fact, taken up by a port, meaning you can do the income or you can do the growth, but not both. I honestly like the income myself. You're going to want to build up your army. You're going to want to march over here and take Shagrath out, give it to your vassal. Then you take the Frozen City here, and with that fortress, you will then be bordering Crone Hellebron, and then further to the west, Malekith. Your victory conditions are to win a quest battle, which is not hard, but you need to control these various areas, including part of Hellebron's area. Overall, in my experience, you spend most of your game fighting the Dark Elves. You're going to fight Hellebron, then you're going to fight Malekith, then you're going to fight whoever else controls the area. To the north here, though, is another Warriors of Chaos faction, the Khornite one, the Gore Queen. She doesn't necessarily get along with you that well. I've actually gone to war with her. She uses Khorne units, which are honestly a pretty nasty counter for your units. It's still possible to win with ambushes and flanks. Honestly, though, unless you can get a alliance with her, it's worth killing her off. And once you do, this whole area is pretty much yours to control. Once you do, then you can just expand south, or you can just simply go overseas and invade other areas. Sigvald has a pretty safe area. Be aware, though, up here, and it's a little hard to get up here, Malice Darkblade lurks. So he gets along with demon factions when he's possessed by a demon, but when he's not possessed by a demon, he hates you. So he tends to do a lot of aggression pacts, breaks them, aggression pacts, breaks them stuff. Left alone, he can become kind of dangerous, and I've seen him conquer this area before. Just be aware he lurks as a threat. Up here also is the Demons of Chaos, the build your own lord faction guy. You can usually get along with him. I've had him declare war on me once. Honestly, you can crush him without too much effort, so go ahead and do that. This faction here, though, is Slaanesh. They're not worth killing early on unless they start losing to Malice. Later on, they become a half-decent ally, really. You have bonuses towards getting along with them. It's really a shame that you can't do more with them. That's my big issue. You can make them your vassal, given time. I pulled it off, but the reality is they tend to die to Malice before anything else. And that's it. There's not a ton of different things we haven't already covered as this guy. Build up, go against the Dark Elves. Be aware the Dark Elves are anti-armor, so having heavy armored units, they actually do pretty well against. They have a strong range if they can build to it, but if you strike early, you can easily overrun their units with the Marauders and stuff. You're going to want to be using Cav against them, in my experience. While Cav is not overwhelmingly strong, Slaaneshi Cav, which is what you get, is particularly decent. So you can simply charge in and rout their units. Now, when I say Slaaneshi Cavalry, you actually start with access to the Sensuous Branding Iron, which allows you to immediately, at the start, convert your units into Slaaneshi Marauders and stuff. Now, be aware that the Slaaneshi Marauders are still not overwhelmingly great at combat, but they do have access to this Mark of Slaanesh with more physical resistance and speed, which can be quite nice. They don't get any charge bonuses at this level, but as you build them up, the Cav gets significantly stronger. I recommend going Cav here. You could honestly go undivided, but considering you get reduced upkeep for the Slaanesh units, Chosen of Slaanesh are still decent melee units. Build them up. You can get Slaanesh units from the beginning. I recommend turning almost all your existing Marauder units, if you can, into Slaanesh units. Overall, it's going to make them more expensive to maintain, but they got slightly better stats. And just use Slaanesh units. Have fun. If you want, you can try seducing factions to joining you. You can't do it. You can't do it to everybody, but it's quite possible for you to get these Norska to yourself onto your side. As long as they do diplomacy with you, the seductive influence will spread. It's quite possible to pull Throg or even Wulfric the Wanderer under your thrall, if that makes sense. And overall, enjoy. He's fun. He plays different than the other two old Warriors of Chaos, but he could be more different. On to the last one, Be'lakor, the Shadow Prince. Okay, here we are as the last of the Warriors of Chaos undivided lords. The other ones we will cover in another video, just so that this thing doesn't go on for several hours. So this is Be'lakor, the Shadow Prince. Some of you may not have access to him. That's because Be'lakor, the Shadow Prince, is unlocked by doing the whole Souls race, the base campaign of Total Warhammer 3. Once you do, he also gets unlocked in Mortal Empires. He's considered an undivided lord, and he's quite interesting. He's got some different mechanics. First thing, he is a standard tech tree, which means that's why he's getting covered in this video. So, first off, he's the Harbinger. Any demonic units he has in his army are cheaper to maintain. This is good because you'll get them through various gifts. Being able to maintain them cheaper is nice. You have access to all the Chaos God slots. I'm not going to go into it, but I'm not going to do the whole battle. But suffice to say, you have one slot in each of the Chaos Gods as well as a undivided one, which is nice because then you can start focusing on sending souls to one of the Chaos Gods and unlock their further gifts. I personally like to do Khorne or Slaanesh early on. Don't tend to like Zeech, to be honest. Nurgle's okay. So outside of that, you also have the ability to corrupt a human lord into becoming a demon prince. This requires some explanation. People have a lot of questions on this. A lot of questions. So if you fight a battle with a human lord, similar to how the Gift of Slaanesh or Sigvald or Nakari work, they will get an icon on them. Now, it's not like them. It's not this big glowing purple thing. It'll appear down here near where the stance is. And it will be Be'lakor's shadow. After 10 turns, if the lord doesn't die, the lord will automatically die and be added to your pool of lords to recruit. It will keep the name. You cannot do it to legendary lords, sadly. But if you do, they become an Chaos Undivided Lord, which is kind of nice, considering you're an undivided faction. It's great. It's kind of useful. I honestly didn't use it that much, but if you can target strong lords, it's great. Sadly, you can't do it to legendary lords, which would make it totally broken. You can do it with heroes, though, rather than actually fighting battles. So you can simply take one of these guys, send them out, and do repeated hero actions against them. There's no specific hero action to use that has a higher chance of success, I found. Just keep hitting them until you see it pop up. I didn't get any notification that I had replied it. I actually had to do research to see, oh, this is where it appears. Anyhow. Moving on, you have some other different things for Be'lakor. You do not have that eye icon up here. Instead, you have access to the Great Game. Now, obviously, they might patch this and change it to make it more in line with the other Chaos Undivided Lords, but for now, it's different. So the Great Game is similar to the Mono Gods. Periodically, one of the Chaos Gods will lead in the Great Game, at which point more bonuses will unlock. In this case, Unholy Manifestations, which Be'lakor can use. His, however, are different than the Mono Gods. He has one from each of them. It changes based off which god is leading in the Great Game. So the Blood God's Grudge gives you blood letters as well as combat stats for your units. The Plague Father's Cleanse spreads Nurgle corruption as well as give you a Plague Bearer of Nurgles. I think this is the weakest of the manifestations. The next one, the Demonettes of Slaanesh, causes damage to the army. Hit the enemy with it or hit one of your weak armies, you'll get more Demonettes of Slaanesh, which are really good, cheap flanking units if you haven't used them. And then there's this one, the Cursor's Boon. This is going to be the most important one for you. Be'lakor has another mechanic called Rifts, which if you play the whole Champions of Chaos, the new DLC with the 4 other Warriors of Chaos Lords we're not talking about here, that's in part 2, you'll know that you can set up rifts. Be'lakor can do that. So what he has are these rifts. Now, at the start of the game, he's on Albion. Oh, it doesn't appear yet. There's one over here in Ostermark near the Wargrove of Woe. So right there. Oh, it doesn't show up on the map, but it is there. That's what that little icon is. And then there's another one down here in the Southern Chaos Wastes. They cannot be closed by the enemies. They cannot be used by the enemies. But if you are to march into one of them, Traverse Rifts, you can then pick one of these rifts, click on it, and you can teleport to them. Just like that. This allows Be'lakor's armies to get around the map, and you can simply fortify an Albion and then go invade another part of the world. What this Unholy Manifestation does, if you have an army in an area, you can cast this. It will create a rift there. That rift will last the whole game. Can't be destroyed, can't be closed, as well as give you access to pink horrors. This means sending either a single army, one like a lord, into the enemy land, setting up a rift, and then running away can be powerful. Or you can do it as Be'lakor as you invade, just to lock in your gain. For example, if you lose your army, you can set up a rift prior to it, like if you suspect it's coming, and then you just build up a new army, teleport back, and you're where you are. It can be useful on flanking. It also means you can defend a lot more territory than you would expect because you can jump between any of the rifts. Set up one on one end of your territory, one on the other. One turn, you cross to the other side. Quite powerful. Those are his unholy manifestations. So let's look at Be'lakor himself. So Be'lakor, you'll note, is a very good fighter, good combat stats, as well as magical armor-piercing attacks. He has this Shadow Shroud, where he can give himself damage resistance, word save 40% for 33 seconds. It's really nice, as well as physical resistance, as well as good missile resistance. His stats here, he has +2 all authority. So he has +2 in all of them. This is because he's Chaos Undivided and he works with all the other various Chaos factions, I guess. It's a little odd. He has a standard blue line. It is different than the other old Warriors of Chaos Lords. It's more in line with the new Warriors of Chaos lines. So I suspect either they'll be updated or he'll be changed. Devious plotting could be useful for him to get more ambushes. I recommend moving around in ambush stance a lot so you don't get dogpiled by armies. This helps a lot with that. Relentless Advance, if you're having trouble with attrition, can be useful. Otherwise, devious plotting is probably the best outside of maybe the cheaper recruitment cost. Definitely get Route Marcher first, though. Draft Master, +1 recruit rank. This is huge on a Warriors of Chaos because it will allow you to get units at a higher rank. Combine it with a Cav, you'll be getting level 3 units. Combining it with Renowned and Feared, you'll be getting level 4 units. So they only need to level up once before you can change them, devote them to one of the Chaos Gods, or just rank them up in general. Outside of that, Draft Master is great. I would get Logician here to get the additional casualty replenishment. If you want spells, do this. But honestly, Sustained by Slaughter, cheaper upkeep, combined with Renowned and Feared, cheap, re-recruitable army that starts at a higher rank, as well as healing quickly. He's got your standard red line for the Warriors of Chaos. I still recommend Dominating Presence as one of your first things you snag on Warriors of Chaos because of that XP gain. It stacks nicely with his other stuff. Sadly, he does not get a trait that boosts XP gain on the blue line. He has access to the shadow spells. They're okay. Penumbral Pendulum can be quite useful early on in wiping out armored units when fighting yours. I don't recommend focusing him into magic, though. I recommend much more making him a fighter. Standard yellow line. He's already got decent combat stats, meaning melee defense is good. He does have a low level of armor, though, so you could justify taking thick-skinned to make him stronger. Now, his personal abilities. He is the Lord of Torment. So the more enemies in range with low leadership, the more healing and power recharge he gets. The enemy starts routing, this guy heals. It's really nice. Downside is you have to start a unit to Wavering first for it to trigger. You can do it very well with Cav flank. He's also a pretty speedy unit, so he can run behind and isolate units as well. He who heralds the conquerors. Leadership as well as cheaper warband upgrade for your demon units. So your various demon units can be upgraded as well. From like Bloodletters to Exalted, from Demonettes to Exalted Demonettes, etc. They only get one, but the cheaper cost is nice, I would say. And the XP gain for Lords and Heroes is really handy, especially if you're devoting a lot of them to various Chaos Gods. Blood and Magic, this is just a flat-out boost for each type of demon. Charge bonus is great on Slanesh. The defense on Nurgle is great. The weapon strength on Khorne. It's overall a great thing. The downside is it affects all of them. So if you're not using all of them, obviously it's less useful than if you use all of them. The 12 melee defense on the Nurgle demons is kind of nuts, though. Nurgle is already really tanky. Honestly, that should probably be 6, not 12, because they become almost immortal with that. Whispers in the Darkness constantly lowers leadership, as well as removing immune to psychology. There's not a lot of abilities that remove immune to psychology. It's really nice. Then you can cast spells to make the enemy lower further. Doom and Darkness. He doesn't have it, but if you get a mage that has Doom and Darkness, that can help, as well as the Withering here, combined with, say, Fear and Terror, can be great at causing the enemies to run away. This guy already has Fear and Terror. Since it affects enemies around him, an enemy walks near him, he's going to lose like 16 leadership almost immediately. It's great. Father in Shadow, Chaos Sorcerers, better recruitment. Any of his Lure of Shadow magics are cheaper and easier to use. Okay. Messengers of the Great Undivided, huge boost in corruption as well as authority overall. Cheaper maintenance, more better replenishment, cheaper recruitment, great ability, as well as causing more chaotic corruption. Cause more problems for the enemy. Sadly, unless you own the province, you're probably not going to be spreading much corruption into enemy lands at the moment. And then up top, Undivided Authority. He can level it up further. It's nice if you're using Undivided. His strength, of course, lies in using demons. And then the Dark Master. This is a great anti-lord ability. Drop it on them. Negative 40 melee attack. Cripples even the strongest ones. Voice of the Dark Gods. Better Dominating Presence Aura. Hearts of Iron. Okay. Aura of Chaos. Missile resistance. Dark Master's definitely worth it, though. And his quests, he gets one that he gets at level 7. No quests, no nothing. He just gets it. I think he should have a battle, personally. Undivided authority +2. It's nice. Income, okay. 25 is pretty decent. I'll give you that. Weapon strength, weapon attack, all good. Blade of Shadow, this is quite nice. The more kills he gets, the more melee attack bonuses he gets, as well as armor piercing damage. This is a good argument for why you shouldn't take Deadly Blade on him. He doesn't really need it. He's going to get a fair amount of kills anyway, so he'll build up his melee attack. And he can get up to +40. He already has 70. You don't need +100. It doesn't help much. Outside of that, I recommend probably grab the armor, thinking about it more. The melee defense, obviously damage, as well as more melee defense, as well as onslaught. He's an interesting faction, though, in terms of using demons, because these they don't directly say demon units, but they are infantry. So getting Legions of Doom should affect your demonic units as well. Stand and Die is just great if you're using demons, so that way they don't crumble or become unstable. He is a demon, though, so he does not rout. He dies where he stands. Just be aware of that. So if he gets isolated, he will go down pretty quickly because he's demonic. Well, not quickly, but if he gets isolated and his leadership gets really low, he will die quite quickly if he's on his own. Keep him around other people. He's a great fighter. He's a decent spellcaster. He really weakens the enemy just being around him. Honestly, though, he doesn't feel unique enough for the guy who was the big bad of Total Warhammer 3. So your starting location, you're on Albion. Build up. Fight the initial battle here against the Tzeentch faction. Take Conquata. This is now your fortress. Build up. Take Citadel of Lead. I'd give it to the Norska that you have nearby. Now you've got a great fortress. Honestly, I recommend just hopping in a rift and either heading to the Southern Chaos Waste or more likely over here to Ostermark and then just wrecking things over there. Your win condition is to take out the various factions. Now, this is Nakari's faction. He dies to Tyrion without you even having to do anything. The Sightless you're going to kill by taking the island. The Decadent House, on the other hand, is Sigvald. He doesn't die that easily. He will die late game sometimes, or else he'll dominate. It can be worth going after him early on, so once you take the island, just setting sail and finishing him off, in which case you then become him and go fight the Dark Elves. Or you go off and fight in the Empire. With your rifts, you can invade anywhere so long as you send an army first. Definitely put a fortress in Conquata, then kind of just sit back. No one's really going to bother you there. The biggest threat to you is honestly Luan Lioncoeur, who may invade you from Bretonnia. Thankfully, he's not particularly great, and your garrison pretty hard counters him until he gets elite cav. You could also invade and conquer him if you want to, but then you're getting involved with the whole Bretonnian Empire squabble. If you are going to do it, strike early while Bretonnia is weak. And that's pretty much it as this guy. He's different. He still is kind of, I don't know where they're going to take him. I think he needs some rework. Anyway, that is it for this guide. Thank you guys all for watching. If you enjoyed it, please do leave a like, a comment, subscribe, and ring that lovely bell. I do answer a lot of comments. Look forward to part 2 of this, where I cover the other Warriors of Chaos. And in general, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys hopefully in another guide, let's play, or a live stream. Bye for now.